Hello, this is FortiGuard Live. Once again, I'm Derek Manky, of course, and I'm joined with Aamir Lakhani.
Hey, Derek, glad to be back with you.
Yeah, it's been so many great conversations we've had throughout 2020 and moving into 2021. I wanted to talk today about basically a summary of the attack surface. There's a lot of stuff that happened in 2020. Make some comparisons from the years before, and then look at where we're heading towards for 2021. I think it's surely going to be an active year for sure. So let's just flash back. I mean, obviously, COVID, right, was dominant at the start of 2020 in terms of the threat landscape. We talked about the initial surge of phishing lures that we saw. There's over 600 given campaigns, not individual detections, but campaigns. Each campaign having different targets, different social engineering lures, different languages, verticals, all that sort of stuff. And I don't think we were really too surprised when that happened, because again, we always say about attackers hopping on the latest vulnerable target, and that was an attack of opportunity, which certainly played out through the first half of 2020, right?
Yeah, absolutely. Attackers have always taken advantage of whatever news cycle is out there, whatever they can do to take advantage of people's emotion or whatever is going on in the world. And they did that with COVID. It wasn't surprising at all that we saw a shift in whatever attackers were doing in 2019 or even in January of 2020. They decided to shift and decided to focus all their efforts around COVID-related themes in their attacks, whether it was phishing or whether it was drive-by downloads or ransomware, whatever was the case, it's just started exploding around the COVID whole information and situation.
Yeah, so that was it was good in a sense that we didn't have this element of surprise after, of course, we learned about COVID and what was happening. And I think there was a lot of good wins we talked about in the industry. Generally, we saw that in the second half of 2020. A decline in activity from that initial surge of COVID campaigns. Of course, one target, and the target of choice being the initial COVID lures from layoffs and all that stuff happening to job hirings happening in Q3 and Q4. That was a natural evolution of that as well, and I think. The good news is that initial wave started subsiding also because there was a lot of education in the industry. This just wasn't one country or one vertical. And so to me, all the alliance work that we do on cybercrime, in between, Interpol as an example with Watch Your Cyber Hands campaign to Cyber Threat Alliance, because it was all hands on deck, there was very positive impact there. And there was really... from attackers, usually we see a lot more flavors of attack in terms of, new malware families and variants coming out. That certainly happened, but not to the same level as we've seen in the past, right?
Yeah, absolutely. So first of all, I am pretty proud of being in the cybersecurity community and seeing like this, how everyone just got together. I mean, first of all, even at Fortinet, we made training.fortinet.com available to everyone, where everyone could start getting training. I had my family members and my mom started getting training, just security awareness training. And we saw that around the industry. We saw people like on Twitter from the cybersecurity industry get together with training, with social efforts. So everyone was passing information. And I think we got a lot better at sharing threat intelligence, as you said, with the Cyber Threat Alliance, with other alliances as well. Organizations were sharing threat information, so that was great. We got a good handle of what was happening, and I think that is why we weren't surprised. We were able to our systems work the way we wanted them to work and the way we were expecting them to work. And that was good. And in some ways, like I said, there wasn't that variety, as you said, in 2019. 2019 may have been the year of PII leak, as we've discussed before. There was a lot of just leakage of information, a lot of databases we heard about being leaked or stolen, as well as all the other stuff happening as well. We kind of saw a shift in 2020 on not only COVID, but then stimulus to welfare, to medicines and vaccines, to the US-based elections. All these subjects were kind of more contained in some ways, but a lot more widespread just from a volume based.
Yeah. Education was definitely, I would say, a key win in 2020. I mean, the most successful it's been in my 20 years of cybersecurity experience, I would say. And for those reasons, like you said, it was an end-to-end coverage, right, to all the way to consumers. I think because people were connected, people were listening, people are actually, understanding that there is a threat, obviously in the physical world, but also in the cybercrime world too, especially with obviously the work from home environment. That was a big shift that we talked about. Email-based threats, phishing being the priority to web-based threats. There's been a huge ramp up. We're just talking about our latest playbook, which talks about web-based threats, right? JavaScript RAD as an example. There's been, but again, it wasn't the big headlines of the years prior, like Stuxnet or WannaCry, because those were specific and relatively short-lived compared to what was a longer drawn-out campaign for COVID, as an example, in the work-from-home environment, right?
Yeah, absolutely. It was kind of continuous, right? It started becoming a statistic to people, and I think people understood. When they're working from home, they have slowdowns. They have like family members at home going to school, remote learning, video games, whatever may be the case. They understood they kind of had to share that network. I think also, maybe it's just me, but I think people understood that when you don't have that person-to-person contact, you can't take things for granted. So you're paying a little more attention, trying to be more interactive, taking advantage of the remote kind of video conferencing and remote opportunities, but also making sure you're fully engaged as well. So we got a lot of stuff done this year from a cybersecurity research perspective.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, there's definitely a lot of silver linings and a lot of good wins, I would say. As we talked about the education, but there's also been great advancements in terms of the collaborative spirit, like you said, and not only just between private to private sector vendors, but public-private sector relationships. And you mentioned families, right? Even that education coming down to the consumers and users' families. So I think that was a great win, but obviously, our work is not done. There's still a lot of relevant threats. All industries were hit here. There were still new ransomware campaigns that happened. TrickBot was a big thing in 2020. There's obviously a coordinated takedown attempt led by Microsoft, which is great. And there's new ransomware still. You talked about PII, personal information and data being the ransom currency of the past. And I still think of the future, and we'll talk about that in a second. But also, ransom has moved to this new model of denial of service, essentially, ransom of services, ransomware targeting public sector. We've seen this recently with eGregor as an example, which also has some new tricks up their sleeves, like using printers to print out the ransom note, which was quite interesting too.
Yeah, so one of the things you're mentioning is ransomware attacks, expanding in other industries besides IT, OT, operational technology. Another good example of that, where ransomware and other cyber attacks are now affecting us in the real world, kinetic type attacks, attacks on printers, not only like using your printer, using your resources, drying your ink, right? We're seeing, ransomware being out there, denial of service attacks, asking for ransom. So in order for you to just use your system or your internet, a lot of companies, a lot of people don't have a choice. It's not like you can go into the office, work from home, go to your local coffee shop. A lot of places have restrictions. So you're limited on your on-ramps on the internet, and attackers know this. So they're like, hey, what can I do to slow you down or motivate you to pay even more? And they took advantage of that. Yeah,
definitely. And So let's talk a little bit about 2021. So it's going to be a big year. Every year is a big year. Every year is a big year for cybersecurity, but it seems to be getting more intense every year. And I think in 2021, we're going to be seeing all of the above. And that's been sort of the lesson of the past that we've learned, right? We have all this stuff, even threats that are, we put this in our threat landscape report as an example, the second half threat landscape report. We saw a record amount of new vulnerabilities that have been discovered, but not attacked yet being the operative word. A lot of them are the ones being attacked in the wild. They're 2 years old, right? 2 to 3 years old. So that just makes me think, wow, if they're using still most of the volume we're seeing is from 2-year-old CVEs and attacks. And there's 2 years of new vulnerabilities that are not even being favored or leveraged yet. Again, like we say, it's not a matter of if, but when.
Yeah, absolutely. Why wouldn't an attacker want to use a new vulnerability when the old vulnerability works just fine? They don't want to burn their attack, so they're going to save that until the old vulnerability doesn't work. I think attackers in 2021 are going to definitely look at where they can make the most impact for their attacks. And what does that mean, right? Because, at first they could make a lot of impact through the home users, everyone's shifting from home. What does this mean in 2021? And I think it does mean more OT, operational technology attacks. I think it means much more cloud attacks. I think it means much more attacks on mobile networks or satellite networks or whatever may be the case. We're all going mobile. We're all trying to stay connected while we're mobile, and we're trying to get that speed. And attackers are going to take advantage of that new, I don't want to say borderless because that term's been around for a while, but this new, world that's out there. I don't know.
Yeah, no, that's true. And that's something that we called out in the threat predictions as well. I think that is going to really give rise to this new breed of threat, which is the edge access Trojan. So everything you're talking about is that expansion of the edge essentially being omnipresent, right? And Trojans are going to follow with that, right? That attack surface. Absolutely. I think especially considering like what we just talked about, there wasn't a huge, not to the years prior, a massive innovation increase in 2020 by attackers. So I think that is on the horizon. I think that's inevitable that's going to happen in 2021. Unfortunately, that's going to include everything we talked about from swarm, the edge access Trojans, the weaponization of automation, artificial intelligence, and machine learning, and we always talk about the what's coming ahead, but there's also a good focus and application to machine learning and AI as an example. We talked in a previous episode about playbooks, right? And we're talking about how AI and ML as an example can be used to actually enhance playbooks, right? I mean, the more that we apply machine learning to models on threat intelligence, the more we're going to expose the cyber criminals, the more we're going to be able to integrate those into AI-driven security operations. And I think there's a lot of good innovation. I guess what I'm trying to say is a lot of good innovations on the cusp for 2021 as well.
Yeah, one of the things that AI and ML is helping us is the speed of automation. And that's really, really important when fighting cyber attacks. So it used to be that AI and ML were like tools that we could use for research, tools that we could use for reverse malware engineering. It kind of gave us a better idea of how to pull apart things. And now we're getting to the point where AI and ML is really helping us defend networks and organizations. Now we can start actually going into policies in our security devices through APIs and for other things, and making those smart decisions on what to block, when to block it, without sacrificing performance, changing the rules, changing the software-defined world whenever it needs to. And that's going to be something really interesting to see and something cool to see. I'm sure we're going to have growing pains as the world in general is going to have growing pains on figuring out how to get those algorithms 100% correct. But once it's there, I think we have a lot better fighting chance than we did in the past.
Yeah, and like we always say, we need those tools. And there's just with everything we talked about and what's coming ahead, we have to be prepared for that. That's where obviously we need to rely more on just extending what we had on our security operations center at FortiGuard Labs as an example to give these tools to customers, to end users to be able to use. And AI ML is a great example. Virtual assistants, virtual analysts, like we've put into, it's not just an assistant, but an analyst, right? Technical capabilities put into FortiAI as an example too. And the list goes on.
Yeah, absolutely. But the scary part a little bit is if it starts working on the defensive side, attackers are going to see how they can manipulate that and make it work on the offensive side. It may be like one of those sci-fi books. You just have like two AI engines fighting each other and figuring out what the outcome is without
that's called the flash war. Because by the time you blink, it's already over.
Exactly. So that'll be a brave new world, as we say.
Yeah, but the good news is, again, I think we have a lot of advantage on the cybersecurity on the industry, right? Because we have more people working together. The collaborative impact has been a huge success, I'd said, in 2020. I think so. We're going to continue to see more of that. I think that we do have an advantage. It's been more R&D, more investment put into AI and ML as an example too. So I would say we're in a good position, but a lot more work to be done. And I look forward to continuing that journey with you, Aamir. Thanks so much for your insights. Really appreciate it. We're out of time. This is Derek Manky with FortiGuardLIVE signing off.